Hey everybody, my name's Colin. I'm Eva's dad, and Eva brought in a really cool home ex today, right, of little hedgehogs with crystals growing on their backs. And the crystals are really long and spiky, and it looks super cool. And one of the things that I don't think she got a chance to talk about is why they grew all long and spiky and why they grew on the back of that hedgehog, right? So I wanted to talk about that a little bit because I thought you might find it as interesting as I do. So I took a picture of a little piece of paper plate, where some of the solution that we made, that salt and water solution, had dropped. And I want to show you what's going on in there because it's really cool, right? If you look at this little blue drop, it's kind of shiny, a little bit sparkly, but it's flat. There's no big spiky crystals growing on it, right? Well, let's look at it under a microscope. And when we look at it under the microscope, what we're going to see is all those little shiny spots. Those are all tiny little crystals. And on top of that field of little shiny spiky bits is a nice long crystal, an orderly rectangular crystal like you see sticking on the back of that hedgehog. Well, why is that? If you remember the molecule picture that Eva showed you, salt is a crystal. It's got a really well-ordered structure. That means that it likes to be in squares. It likes to be in rectangles, right? The molecules like to line up in straight lines, which is why it grows in that crystalline structure. But without a crystal for it to start on, it doesn't know which direction to grow in. It doesn't know which way to go. So when you put a drop of that solution on a paper plate and it starts to recrystallize, the water evaporates, it doesn't know where to go. So it starts just making little crystals all over the place. But eventually, those little crystals, that field of crystals, which we call seed crystals, right? That's where new crystals start to form. So new crystals will say, hey, I know where to go. I'm going to go here where this crystal is, and I'm going to grow from that crystal because I like structure and I like to be well ordered. So that's why you see this little field of sparkly bits. Those are all seed crystals. And then in a couple of spots, new crystals decided to start growing or forming from that seed crystal. And that's what happened on Eva's hedgehog, right? We made that solution of salt and water. And if you remember from the molecule chart, right, the well-ordered salt molecules, they kind of broke apart and got surrounded by water. But when that water cooled down, that salt wanted to get back together and form crystals. So we had to make sure it didn't just form crystals randomly and just now you've got little sparkles all over the place falling like snow. We wanted really cool spikes. So that little plastic hedgehog has what's called a gypsum base, a little gray dome on the back of it, right? Gypsum is a salt, right? And the chemical name for that salt is calcium chloride. So that salt there is in a little dome on the back of the hedgehog, and it doesn't dissolve in the hot water as easily as that other salt did. So when that salt starts to form back in the water, it doesn't just form anywhere. It sees this nice bed of seed crystals, this calcium chloride just sitting there, and it goes, I'm going to grow here where there's already crystals, and I already know where I can start from and where my structure should go. So that's how you get these really cool long spikes. One other thing that I wanted to show you real quick was how we got those crystals to be colorful. How do you get a blue crystal and a green crystal? It's not because we're using magic or because we're using a special kind of crystal or a salt that grows in that color, right? What happens is, and I took a picture through the microscope of this too, what happens is when those crystals form, sometimes they trap things inside of them. So if you look in this picture, and this is one of those long crystals underneath the microscope, you see the salt crystal is really well ordered. It's really sharp lines, straight lines, rectangles. And in the middle of it, there's all this blue stuff. And that doesn't look so well ordered, right? It's a little zigzaggy, it looks a little blobby. And we know that that's not salt doing that because salt likes to be well ordered in a nice linear structure. What that is it's water with food coloring in it that's trapped in the middle of that crystal as that crystal grows. So sometimes that crystal structure, which we call a lattice, that crystal structure will form around the water and hold some water inside it, in its middle. And that's why the crystal has a blue color, because we're seeing through that clear crystal into the food coloring water in the middle. So anyways, that's a little bit more about what's happening with these really cool crystal hedgehogs. I hope you found it as interesting as I did, and you have a wonderful day.